Good morning from the greenhouse. We've had a lot of questions and emails from people in the last few weeks, and quite a few of them are similar. So we thought that while we tried to get back to everyone, we just haven't been able to do that. So we thought if we made a couple of short videos that we'd be able to answer some of the most common questions. One of the first things that people are asking us is where can they source food from local farms. And on Vancouver Island, we're really lucky. We have the Direct Farm Marketing Association, and they have a newsletter that they send out once a year. You can also look at the list of local farms and what produce and products they offer on their website. What I would caution you about, though, is that if it's your first time going out to a farm stand or purchasing directly from a local farmer, please remember that a lot of these farms have been farming for a long time and they have some long-term customers. So we don't want to leave those regular customers short, especially if they live locally or they're seniors. So when you go to a farm stand, just be conscious and respectful about how much you're taking from that stand. Another common question we've been getting is how long do seeds last for? So some folks haven't gardened for a few years, and they're wondering, if they're going to put in that effort of gardening this year, they don't want to waste that time and find out that the seeds are no good. The answer to that question is simple, but there are a couple of parts to it. The first is, what variety of seed do you have? In general, the seeds that are larger, so these bean seeds, for example, these are scarlet runner beans that have been soaked overnight. Soaking a seed before you plant it can help it to germinate a little bit faster. Just a few hours is generally fine. A larger seed like a bean or a pea doesn't store as well, it doesn't last as long than smaller seeds. So if you have bean seeds that are 1 or 2 years old, they're probably fine. If they're older than that, you're going to get a lower germination rate. A lot of them will probably still grow, just not 80-90%. Smaller seeds tend to last longer, and certain varieties also have a longer shelf life. So something like lettuce is good for 4 to 5 years. Something like a tomato, a pepper, or an eggplant, those can be good for 8 or 9 years. This gets us to the next part of that question, and that is, how have you stored your seeds? If you store your seeds in a cool cupboard where it's dry, they're not exposed to light, and it's a pretty consistent temperature, that's probably the best place for you to be storing them. Lots of people will store their seeds in their freezer. Not generally a good idea, because every time you take that box of seeds out of the freezer to look through it and choose what you're going to grow, you're triggering those plants to think, oh, it's springtime, it's warming up. And, most of us aren't that organized. We leave that box out for a day or two while we're planting, and then we put it back in the freezer. And you get some very confused seeds, and it really lowers their germination rate if you're popping them in and out of the freezer like that. So just a cupboard, really good. The other question is, where did you get your seeds from? When you buy seeds locally, those tend to be fresher, and so they will have a higher germination rate, and they will also store longer for you. So the tomato seeds that we grow will generally be good for 8 to 10 years if you store them in a cool cupboard. Another question that we've been getting a lot of is, when can I plant seeds? And happily, if you live in southern British Columbia, the answer is almost all the time. As long as you have a protected area like a greenhouse that you can plant in the winter months, we're really fortunate. We can grow cold season crops like lettuce, any of the brassicas like kale, collards, cabbages, chards, spinach. Those do really well through the winter months. So certainly right now you could absolutely be planting all of those, even outside. When you look at starting your main garden outside, things like beans, for example, that are really more heat loving, or corn, you wouldn't want to start any of those usually until the middle to end of April. May long weekend is traditionally when people will put their starts into the garden of those heat loving plants. So things like your squash starts, your tomato starts, May 15th is usually when you put those in. I think one of the silver linings of the COVID-19 crisis is that there's so many new people approaching us and saying, I really want to grow a garden this year. I really want to grow food with my kids. I realize how important this is. And strangely to me, they're scared they're scared about gardening. And what I've been saying to everyone is, whoa, that's kind of arrogant to be scared. Don't be scared about gardening. Don't say you have a black thumb. These seeds have been, if they're domesticated, they've been co-evolving with humans for sometimes thousands of years. We think that beans, for example, have taken about 8 to 10,000 years in their domestication process. These really want to grow. They have a long history and relationship with humans. It's pretty hard to mess it up. So these little guys want to grow, and people have been asking, how do I plant a seed? It's really easy. Here's the general rule. You will plant a seed 3 times as deep as its size. So if you're gardening with kids, start with a big seed like this because it's satisfying, it'll grow quickly, and it's got like the vavoom factor, right? Like you've got the little pot, you put the seeds in. So I'm going to push these in gently, about 3 times as deep as they are. There we go. These are scarlet runner pole beans, which hummingbirds love the flowers. So there we go. There's my beans in here. I would water them in. And these have the wow factor for kids too, because they come up, they've got big leaves, they grow so fast, they twine, and they produce a lot of food. Some of the other questions that we've had are around, how do I garden with kids? I've never had a garden in my family before. Parents are concerned, right? They want it to be successful, they want it to be a good experience for their kids. How do I garden if I'm living in an apartment and I've only got a window ledge or a small patio and I don't necessarily have great sunlight? How do I garden if I'm fortunate enough to live in a home with some yard space but it's all covered in grass? So these are the kind of questions that take a little bit more detail to answer clearly. So we're going to make a couple more videos, and please watch this spot in the next week.